Imagine waking in a longhouse in 9th century Scandinavia. The air is thick with smoke from the central fire, carrying the smell of bodies, animals, and yesterday's fish. You are a Viking, a word that doesn't just describe who you are, but what you do. It means raider, explorer, warrior, farmer, and survivor all at once. But this life, dramatized in countless modern stories as one of glory and adventure, holds realities that would break most people before the sun reaches its peak. Let us walk through a single day in your existence and discover why you simply wouldn't survive it. You wake in near total darkness, though whether it's truly morning is hard to say. During the depths of winter this far north, the sun barely climbs above the horizon, giving you perhaps 4 hours of twilight before darkness reclaims the world. Your body aches from the cold that has seeped into your bones, despite sleeping near others for warmth. The longhouse, while sheltered from the wind, is far from warm. The central hearth fire has burned down to coals during the night, and frost has formed on the inside of the walls, where your breath and that of 30 other people has condensed and frozen. You share this longhouse with your extended family, perhaps 20 to 40 people, depending on your clan's size and status. Privacy doesn't exist. You sleep in a bed closet, a small alcove built into the wall with wooden panels that can be closed for some measure of separation, but sound travels freely. You've heard every snore, every cough, every intimate moment, every argument. The constant proximity to others would drive modern people, accustomed to private bedrooms and personal space, to psychological breaking points within days. Your bedding consists of furs and rough woolen blankets laid over a wooden platform filled with straw. The straw is months old now, compressed and beginning to rot, harboring insects that bite you throughout the night. Your body is covered in small red welts from these bites, itching constantly, but scratching only makes them worse and risks infection. Modern people who panic at a single bedbug would be horrified to know these parasites are your constant companions, accepted as an unavoidable part of life. As you sit up, your head nearly touches the low ceiling of your sleeping alcove. The air is layered, relatively warmer near the floor where you sleep, but the smoke from the fire collects in the upper portions of the longhouse, stinging your eyes and coating your lungs. You've lived with this smoke your entire life, breathing it every day, and it has damaged your respiratory system in ways you don't understand. Chronic coughing is normal among your people. Many don't live past 40, their lungs slowly destroyed by decades of smoke inhalation. You must navigate in the darkness to the central area where you can begin to revive the fire. This isn't as simple as striking a match. You must find the fire starting kit, a piece of flint, a steel striker, and some dried fungus that serves as tinder. Your hands are stiff and numb from the cold, making the precise striking motion difficult. It takes several minutes of patient work, your fingers cramping, before a spark finally catches and you can carefully nurture it into a flame. Modern people who struggle with minor inconveniences like slow Wi-Fi would find this daily battle against cold and darkness mentally exhausting. As the fire begins to grow, you feed it carefully with precious fuel. Wood is not unlimited here. Every log represents hours of labor. Finding suitable trees, felling them with iron axes that are valuable and require constant sharpening, splitting the wood, hauling it back to the settlement, and storing it where it might dry. During the long winter, fuel consumption is constant, and running out means death. The pressure of this resource management, where a mistake in calculation or an unexpectedly harsh winter could kill your entire family, would be crushing. You must now venture outside to relieve yourself. There is no indoor plumbing, no bathroom. You pull on your outer layers, a thick woolen tunic, your fur cloak, your leather shoes stuffed with straw for insulation, and push open the heavy door. The cold that greets you is breathtaking, literally stealing your breath. Temperatures can drop to -20 or 30 degrees Celsius. The wind, unimpeded across the flat landscape, cuts through even your heavy clothing. You hurry to the designated area behind the longhouse, do your business quickly, and return. But even this brief exposure has left your face burning with cold and your fingers aching. The morning meal is meager and monotonous. Someone has prepared a thin porridge made from barley or oats, perhaps with some dried fish mixed in for flavor and protein. There is no coffee, no tea, no orange juice. You drink water, or, if you're fortunate, small beer, a weak, fermented drink that's safer than water because the fermentation process kills some harmful organisms, though you don't know this. The porridge is bland, barely warm by the time you receive your portion, but you eat it gratefully because this might be all you get until evening. Your teeth hurt as you eat. Dental problems are universal among Vikings. The grain you consume is ground using stone querns, and tiny fragments of stone end up in the flour, slowly grinding down your tooth enamel with every meal. By your age, perhaps mid-20s, you've already lost several teeth. Others are rotting, causing constant low-level pain and occasional flare-ups of excruciating agony when infection sets in. There are no dentists, no painkillers beyond alcohol, or chewing on certain herbs that provide minimal relief. You simply endure, knowing that eventually the painful tooth will either fall out or the infection might kill you. After the meal, the day's work begins immediately. There is no leisure time, no morning coffee break, no scrolling through your phone. Survival demands constant labor, and the winter months are actually when some of the hardest work happens. The animals must be tended, tools must be repaired, clothing must be made and mended, food preservation must continue. Everyone works, men, women, children, old enough to hold a tool. The concept of a 40-hour work week would seem laughably easy. You work from the moment there's enough light to see until exhaustion or darkness stops you, 7 days a week, with no vacation, no sick days, no retirement. Your first task is to tend the animals. Cattle, sheep, goats, pigs, and chickens are kept in a section of the longhouse or in attached structures. This isn't quaint. The smell is overwhelming, a mixture of manure, urine, wet fur, and rot. The animals are thin from winter, their feed running low, and you worry whether they'll survive until spring. Each animal represents enormous value. Losing even one could mean the difference between survival and starvation next year. Modern people who find petting zoos unpleasant would be physically ill within minutes of entering this environment. You must muck out the animal pens, carrying the waste outside to a midden heap. This work is cold, disgusting, and back-breaking. The manure will eventually be used to fertilize fields, but for now, it just accumulates. Your clothes become soiled despite your care. You'll wear these same clothes for weeks or months because you only own one set of winter garments, and washing them in winter is nearly impossible. The smell becomes part of you, something you stop noticing, but that permeates every fiber. The animals need water, which means breaking through the ice on the water source. You take an iron bar and strike repeatedly at the frozen surface of the trough or nearby stream until you can access liquid water. Your hands are quickly soaked and freezing. Frostbite is a constant danger. You've seen men lose fingers and toes to the cold, the frozen flesh turning black and eventually rotting away. You're careful, but accidents happen, and one moment of carelessness could cost you digits you need for every task. Feed for the animals is precious and running low. You carefully measure out dried hay and stored grains, knowing you must make it last until spring grass returns. But spring is months away, and you can see you don't have enough. Decisions will have to be made soon about which animals to slaughter before they starve. Eating the weaker ones to preserve feed for the stronger breeding stock. These calculations involve the potential death of your family if you guess wrong, a weight that would crush modern people used to grocery stores and food security. After tending the animals, you must check on the food storage. The meat you slaughtered in autumn and smoked or salted for preservation must be inspected. Mold and rot are constant threats. You find a ham where the preservation failed. The surface is green with mold, and it smells of decay. This represents a significant loss, perhaps several days' worth of food for your family. Gone. You'll cut away the worst parts and try to salvage what you can. But the knowledge that your margin for survival has just shrunk tighter makes your stomach knot with worry. The dried fish hanging from the rafters must also be checked. Some have been invaded by insects, their larvae burrowing into the flesh. You'll eat them anyway, picking out the worst of the infestation, because you cannot afford to be wasteful. Protein is protein, whether it comes with extra insects or not. Modern people, with their horror of finding a bug in store-bought food, would starve rather than eat these provisions. But you don't have that luxury. Now comes time for repair work that cannot wait. Your shoes are wearing through, the leather soles are thin and cracked, the stitching coming apart. If they fail completely, your feet will freeze. You must sit in the dim light and attempt to repair them, stitching with leather thongs, perhaps adding new patches of leather if you have any to spare. Your fingers are stiff from the cold, making the precise work difficult. The needle is precious iron, and you must be careful not to break it. Modern people who simply buy new shoes when the old ones wear out cannot comprehend the anxiety of knowing your survival depends on your ability to repair this single pair. Your axe needs sharpening. This tool is essential for everything: cutting wood, breaking ice, defense, hunting. Iron is expensive and precious. This axe might be the most valuable thing you personally own. You take it to the whetstone and begin the patient work of restoring its edge. The rhythmic scraping sound filling the longhouse. This task requires skill. Sharpen at the wrong angle, and you ruin the edge. Press too hard, and you might crack the blade. The concentration required in the cold and dim light, with hands that ache from previous work, is immense. While you work on the axe, others in the longhouse are engaged in their own essential tasks. The women are spinning wool or weaving, the constant production of cloth that everyone needs. Children are learning these tasks, their small fingers better suited to some of the fine work. An elder is knapping flint to create tools and arrowheads, a skill that takes decades to master. Everyone contributes, because everyone must. There is no option to opt out, no unemployment benefits, no safety net. If you don't work, you don't eat, and neither does your family. The social pressure within the longhouse is intense. Everyone can see if you're working hard or slacking. Everyone knows if you're contributing your share or taking more than you give. Reputation is everything in a society this small and interconnected. A reputation for laziness or selfishness can lead to social exclusion. And in this environment, social exclusion means death. You must constantly prove your worth, demonstrate your value to the community, maintain the respect of your peers. The psychological weight of this constant evaluation would be exhausting for modern people accustomed to anonymity and privacy. As midday approaches, though the weak winter sun barely climbs above the horizon, the Jarl, your chieftain, calls a meeting. The men gather around the central fire, while the women continue their work, listening but not participating in the discussion. The Jarl speaks of the coming season. Spring will bring the opportunity for raiding, and plans must be made now. Your stomach tightens because you know what this means. You will be expected to join the raid, to leave your family for weeks or months, to risk your life for plunder and glory. The discussion begins with practical matters. Which targets are most promising? Which have been raided too recently and will be too well defended? What intelligence has been gathered from traders and travelers? But underlying all of this is the brutal reality. Raiding means killing, means facing death, means doing violence that will mark your soul forever. Modern people, with their abstracted view of violence from movies and games, cannot comprehend the psychological toll of actually planning to kill strangers and take their possessions. You are expected to maintain your own weapons and armor for these raids. You have a spear, your most important weapon. You have a simple round shield of wood and leather. If you're fortunate, you might have a sword passed down through your family, but more likely you rely on the spear and perhaps an axe or a seax, a long knife. These weapons must be kept in perfect condition, but the damp environment causes rust. The leather bindings rot, the wood warps. Constant maintenance is required, and failure means going into battle with equipment that might fail at the crucial moment. The Jarl speaks of the need for a new ship, or at least major repairs to the existing vessels. Shipbuilding is a communal effort, requiring enormous amounts of labor and resources. Trees must be felled and shaped. Rope must be made from plant fibers. Wool must be woven for sails. Iron must be forged for nails and fittings. Everyone will be expected to contribute labour to this project. The modern concept of specialists doing all the work while you pay with money doesn't exist. If you want a ship to raid from, you must help build it. The physical demands of Viking shipbuilding would defeat most modern people. The logs must be split using wedges and then shaped using just axes and adzes. No power tools, no precision equipment, just skill and endless hours of heavy labour. Your back screams from the constant bending and striking. Your hands blister and callous. The work continues in all weather because it must be completed before the raiding season. There are no shortcuts, no way to hire someone else to do it. Either you contribute or you don't go on the raid, and not going means not sharing in the plunder your family desperately needs. As the planning discussion continues, older men speak of previous raids, sharing wisdom, but also revealing the psychological scars they carry. One man speaks of a monastery raid where monks were slaughtered. His voice is matter of fact, but you can see something behind his eyes, a darkness, a weight. Another speaks of a raid that went wrong, where Vikings were trapped and cut down, where he watched his brother die screaming. These stories are meant to prepare you, but they also reveal the trauma that awaits. There is no counselling for PTSD here, no recognition that these experiences damage you. You simply endure or you break. The discussion turns to divination. The vulva, a seeress of your community, will be consulted about the raid's prospects. She will interpret signs, cast runes, enter trance states to communicate with the gods. You believe in this absolutely, with the same certainty that modern people believe in weather forecasts. The gods are real, their favour is essential, and their displeasure can doom an entire expedition. The psychological framework of your world is so different from modern rationalism that the mindset alone would be disorienting. After the meeting, you must return to work, but now with the additional weight of knowing that in a few months you'll be expected to board a ship and risk your life. The anticipation builds slowly, a constant low-level anxiety that will grow as the season approaches. You've been on raids before, you've killed, you've seen friends die, you carry those memories, but each time is terrifying. The casual way your society treats this violence, the expectation that you'll simply deal with it and continue functioning, would be recognized as deeply traumatic by modern standards. You spend the afternoon working on leather goods, shoes, belts, straps, bags. Everything needs constant repair or replacement. The leather working tools are simple: sharp knives, awls for punching holes, bone or iron needles. The work requires precision despite your cold, numbed fingers and the poor lighting. A poorly made shoe will fall apart when you need it most. A weak strap might cause your shield to fail in battle. The stakes of even this simple craft work are life and death. As evening approaches, the light begins to fail early. It's perhaps only 2 in the afternoon by modern reckoning. But this far north in winter, that's all the daylight you get. The longhouse grows darker and work becomes increasingly difficult. Lamps can be lit, simple dishes of seal oil or fish oil with a wick, but fuel for these is precious, and the light they provide is weak and smoky. Most evening work happens by touch or by the flickering firelight, squinting and straining in conditions that would be considered inhumanely dark by modern standards. The cold intensifies as night approaches. The temperature inside the longhouse, which never rose above barely tolerable during the day, now drops precipitously. You move closer to the fire, but this means competing for space with 30 other people who are also seeking warmth. The social dynamics of who gets to sit closest to the fire are complex, based on age, status, and relationships. As a younger member of the household, you often end up in the colder periphery, shivering while the elders and the household head enjoy the best positions. The evening meal is prepared in a large iron cauldron hung over the central fire. Tonight it's a stew made from salted meat, dried peas, onions, and whatever else can be scraped together from the winter stores. The smell is appetizing after a day of hard labor, but the portions are smaller than you'd like. Food must be rationed to last until spring, and everyone is always slightly hungry. The constant semi-starvation would make modern people, accustomed to eating whenever they're hungry, irritable and obsessed with food. Mealtime is also social time, one of the few periods when work pauses and the community gathers. Stories are told, news is shared, disputes are aired. This is how your culture is transmitted, how history is remembered, how social bonds are maintained. But it's also where conflicts can escalate. Insults exchanged over the evening meal can lead to feuds that last generations. The social navigation required is complex and exhausting. Every word must be considered, every reaction controlled. Modern people who struggle with office politics would find this constant social chess game overwhelming. The seating arrangement at meals is hierarchical and significant. The Jarl and his immediate family sit in the high seat, a position of honor at the center of the long side of the fire. Others are arrayed according to their status and relationship to the Jarl. Where you sit communicates your place in the social order, and any attempt to sit above your station would be met with immediate challenge. Modern concepts of equality and merit-based advancement don't exist here. You are born into your status, and changing it requires extraordinary deeds or marriage alliances. As the meal concludes, the drinking begins. Mead or ale is passed around in communal horns or cups. Refusing to drink is offensive. It suggests you don't trust your host, or that you think yourself above the company. So you drink, even though you know that alcohol impairs judgment and loosens tongues, and many conflicts start when men are drunk. You've seen fights break out over slights, real and imagined, seen men draw weapons over insults, seen friendships destroyed, and blood feuds started over drunken arguments. But not drinking means social isolation, so you drink and hope to remain clear-headed enough to avoid trouble. The entertainment tonight includes a visiting skald, a professional poet and storyteller. He recites a long poem about a legendary hero, full of complex kennings and allusions that require deep cultural knowledge to fully understand. The performance lasts for hours, and you're expected to pay attention, to laugh at the right moments, to show appropriate reactions. Falling asleep would be insulting, but you're exhausted from the day's labor. The fire is warm, you've just eaten, and the skald's voice is rhythmic and hypnotic. Staying awake requires genuine effort. The poem the skald recites is also propaganda and social instruction. It tells of a warrior who was generous to his followers, brave in battle, who avenged insults to his honor, and who died gloriously fighting overwhelming odds. This is the model you're expected to emulate. The story reinforces the values your society holds dear: courage, generosity, loyalty, vengeance, and glory in death. Modern individualistic values, pursuing personal happiness, avoiding unnecessary risk, seeking peaceful resolutions, would be seen as cowardice and selfishness in this context. After the skald finishes, other forms of entertainment emerge. Someone produces a bone flute and plays haunting melodies. Others start a game of Hnefatafel, a strategic board game similar to chess. Dice games are played, with men betting small items they can afford to lose. These games can also become sources of conflict. Accusations of cheating, disputes over bets, bad luck blamed on cursing. You participate carefully, knowing that even leisure activities carry social and sometimes physical risks. As the evening wears on, people begin to retire to their sleeping alcoves. But the night isn't peaceful. People wake to tend the fire, to relieve themselves in buckets kept for nighttime use, to quiet crying children, to cough from the smoke. You hear every sound, smell every smell. True privacy and quiet don't exist. The constant proximity to others, the inability to ever truly be alone, would drive modern people who value personal space to psychological breaking points. Before sleep, there's a moment for personal reflection. Though it's brief, you lie in your alcove, covered in your furs, listening to the sounds of the longhouse. You think about the coming raid, about the work still unfinished, about the winter that still stretches ahead. You think about your own mortality. Death is so common, so present, that you're constantly aware it could come at any moment, from disease, accident, violence, or starvation. This proximity to death shapes your entire worldview in ways that would be alien to most modern people who live insulated from mortality until old age. Your spiritual world is also active in these quiet moments. You murmur prayers to the gods, to Thor for protection, to Odin for wisdom, to Freya for fertile fields in the coming year. These aren't abstract concepts, but real beings who intervene in human affairs, who must be honored and appeased. Offerings must be made, rituals performed, sacred sites respected. The failure to properly honor the gods could bring disaster not just on you, but on your entire community. The psychological weight of this spiritual responsibility would be immense. Morning arrives again in darkness. Today you're joining a hunting party. The stored food won't last without supplementation from hunting, and the Jarl has decreed that fresh meat must be found. You dress in your warmest clothes, knowing you'll be outside all day in brutal conditions. The other hunters gather, checking their weapons, spears for hunting large game, bows for smaller prey, knives for finishing and butchering. Everyone's face is grim. Winter hunting is dangerous, and not everyone who leaves returns. The hunting party sets out in the pre-dawn darkness, following animal tracks in the snow. The cold is intense, and movement is difficult through deep snow. You're wearing skis, long wooden boards strapped to your feet, which help but require skill and balance. Modern downhill skiers would find these primitive cross-country skis exhausting and difficult to control, especially in rough terrain with heavy loads. Your thighs burn, your breathing comes hard, and you've only been traveling for an hour. The landscape is beautiful, but deadly. Snow covers everything, making travel treacherous. You could step through ice into a hidden stream and die of exposure within minutes. You could become separated from the group in a snowstorm and never find your way back. You could disturb a bear's winter den and be mauled. Every step requires attention and care. Modern people who hike on maintained trails with GPS and emergency beacons cannot comprehend the level of constant vigilance required to survive in this environment. The hunting party finds tracks of an elk and excitement builds. This much meat would feed multiple families for weeks. You follow the tracks for hours, moving as quietly as possible despite the crunching snow. Your legs ache, your lungs burn from breathing cold air. Your face is numb, except where the wind finds exposed skin and creates a burning sensation. But you push on, because giving up means returning empty-handed, means families going hungry. When you finally spot the elk, the careful stalking begins. You must approach close enough for a spear throw or bow shot, but elk are wary and have excellent senses. You move with agonizing slowness, crouching low, using every bit of cover. Your muscles cramp from maintaining the awkward positions. One careless sound will send the elk fleeing, wasting the entire day's effort. The patience and physical control required would be impossible for most modern people accustomed to instant gratification and comfortable positions. The moment comes. Multiple hunters throw their spears simultaneously, and at least one finds its mark. The elk bellows and runs, but it's wounded, leaving a blood trail. Now comes the pursuit, following the wounded animal until it weakens enough to be finished. This chase takes hours more, following blood droplets in the snow, tracking through rough terrain. Your body is past exhaustion, running on pure determination and the knowledge that your family needs this meat. When you finally catch up to the elk, it's still alive, but unable to flee further. The killing is not clean or quick or romantic. The animal is terrified and suffering, trying to rise on shattered legs. You must approach carefully. Even dying, it could kill you with its antlers and deliver the killing blow. You've done this before, but it never becomes easy. The look in the animal's eyes as it dies, the sounds it makes, the amount of blood. Modern people shielded from the source of their meat would be traumatized by this necessary reality. Now comes the butchering, and this must be done in the field because the animal is too heavy to transport whole. You use sharp knives to skin the elk, to separate the meat from the bones, to remove the organs. This work is done with numb, clumsy hands in below freezing temperatures. The hot blood steams in the cold air, coating your hands and clothes. The smell is overwhelming. Blood, torn flesh, opened intestines. Modern people who find handling raw meat in a kitchen unpleasant would be sickened by this raw, visceral process. The organs are carefully saved. Nothing is wasted. The heart, liver, kidneys, even the intestines will be eaten or used. The hide will become leather. The bones will be used for tools and broth. The hooves will yield glue. Every part of the animal represents resources too valuable to discard. The thorough utilization required comes from deep necessity. Waste means death. But the level of intimate involvement with animal bodies would disturb most modern people. You must now carry your share of the meat back to the settlement. The loads are heavy, tied into bundles with leather straps. You hoist yours onto your back, and it immediately compresses your spine, making breathing difficult. The journey back will take hours, climbing hills with this weight, skiing through snow, all while exhausted from the day's efforts. Modern people who struggle with grocery bags from car to house would find this burden impossible. As darkness falls during the return journey, the temperature drops even further. Your sweat from exertion has soaked your inner layers, and now it's freezing, making you colder than if you'd been at rest. This is a deadly situation. You must keep moving despite overwhelming exhaustion, because to stop is to freeze. Your mind starts playing tricks, seeing things in the darkness, hearing sounds that aren't there. The line between life and death is this thin, this immediate in every winter hunt. You arrive back at the settlement after dark, stumbling with exhaustion and cold. The meat is distributed according to complex rules of honor and obligation. Those who made the kill get larger shares, but everyone who participated receives something, and the Jarl takes a portion as his due. You carry your family's share to the longhouse, and everyone celebrates this windfall. But you're too tired to celebrate properly. Your body is shutting down from exhaustion and exposure. That night you develop symptoms that terrify you. A fever, shaking chills, a cough that brings up phlegm. You've pushed your body too hard in the extreme cold, and now you're sick. There are no antibiotics, no hospitals, no doctors with medical training as we understand it. The closest thing to medical care comes from those who know healing herbs and old remedies passed down through generations. Someone prepares a tea from willow bark to reduce fever, but its effectiveness is limited. You simply have to endure and hope your body can fight off the infection. The fever worsens over the next days. You drift in and out of consciousness, plagued by nightmares and hallucinations. Your family tends to you when they can, but they also must continue the work of survival. They can't afford to stop everything for one sick person. You lie in your sleeping alcove, shivering despite the furs piled on you, coughing until your ribs ache, feeling like you're drowning in your own fluids. Modern people who get antibiotics at the first sign of infection cannot imagine the terror of a simple respiratory infection that could kill you. During one of your few lucid moments, you see another family in the longhouse grieving. Their child, who was sick with similar symptoms, has died. The small body is wrapped for burial, but burial won't happen until the ground thaws. For now, the body must be stored in a cold outbuilding with others who've died during winter. The casual proximity to death, the acceptance of it as a normal part of life, reflects a reality modern people are shielded from. Child mortality is devastatingly high. Most families lose multiple children before they reach adulthood. If you do survive this illness, it will leave you weakened for weeks. You'll have a persistent cough for months. The infection may have damaged your lungs permanently, making future physical exertion harder. Your body adds this to the accumulated damage from previous illnesses and injuries. Vikings who live to middle age carry the marks of survival on their bodies. Missing teeth, scarred tissue, joints worn from labour, lungs compromised by smoke and disease, hearing damaged from the constant noise of their environment. Injuries are another constant threat. You've seen men lose fingers to axe accidents, suffer permanent disabilities from broken bones that healed poorly, become disfigured from burns or wounds that festered. There's a man in your settlement missing an eye from a training accident. Another walks with a severe limp from a ship injury that crushed his foot. These aren't rare exceptions, but common outcomes of a life filled with dangerous work and no safety equipment. Modern workplace safety standards would seem like impossible luxuries. Parasites are universal. Everyone has intestinal worms from eating undercooked meat, drinking contaminated water, and poor sanitation. You live with constant digestive discomfort, occasional severe cramping, and the slow drain on your nutrition these parasites create. Lice are equally universal. Everyone scratches. Everyone has the small insects living in their hair and clothes. You've become so accustomed to these infestations that you barely notice them. But modern people would be horrified by the constant parasitic load your body carries. Skin conditions are also common. Fungal infections thrive in the damp, dirty conditions. You have a persistent rash that itches maddeningly, but never quite goes away. Others have worse. Open sores that won't heal. Lesions that weep and crust over. Without understanding of hygiene or access to effective treatments, these conditions persist for years or even lifetimes. Bathing is rare in winter. Heating enough water is too resource intensive. so you might go months without a proper wash, your skin accumulating layers of dirt, sweat, and grime. The psychological toll of constant physical suffering would break most modern people. You wake every day in pain from some source. Old injuries, current illness, dental problems, parasites, cold, hunger. Pain is your baseline, and days without it are the exception rather than the rule. Modern people who panic at minor discomfort and have access to a pharmacy full of pain relievers cannot comprehend accepting chronic pain as simply how life is. Scurvy begins to affect people as winter wears on, and the stored vegetables from last season are exhausted. Gums bleed and swell. Old wounds reopen. Fatigue becomes overwhelming. You don't know this is from vitamin C deficiency. You only know that this happens every winter, and the symptoms fade when spring greens become available again. Some people die of it, their bodies simply giving up after months of deprivation. The helplessness of understanding something is wrong, but having no idea how to fix it creates a baseline anxiety about health that never fades. Your immune system, constantly challenged by cold, poor nutrition, parasites, and stress, becomes less effective over time. You catch every illness that passes through the community. A simple cold can become bronchitis. Bronchitis can become pneumonia. There's no prevention beyond luck and the hope that the gods favor you. Modern people accustomed to vaccines, vitamins, and relatively robust health would be constantly sick in this environment. Spring finally arrives, though it comes slowly to this northern land. The days lengthen perceptibly, the snow begins to melt, and spirits lift as the brutal winter loosens its grip. But spring also means the raiding season approaches, and preparations become urgent. The ships that have been stored on land must be returned to the water, repaired, made seaworthy. This is community-wide work that consumes everyone's energy for weeks. The ship you'll sail on is a longship, perhaps 50 feet in length, built from overlapping oak planks in the clinker style. It's beautiful in its way, but it's also your potential coffin. These ships are not particularly seaworthy by modern standards. They ride low in the water, have no protection from waves, and can be swamped in rough seas. But they're fast and can navigate both open ocean and shallow rivers, making them perfect for raids. You eye the vessel with a mixture of pride and dread. Repairing the ship reveals problems accumulated during storage. Some planks have rotted and must be replaced, requiring skilled woodworking. The tarred wool stuffed between planks to make them watertight has come loose and must be redone. The sail, stored carefully but still affected by damp, has developed weak spots and tears that must be mended. Each problem requires specific skills and resources, and delays mean missing optimal raiding weather. The pressure to complete work quickly leads to long days of intense labor. Your own preparations are equally demanding. Your weapons must be brought to peak condition. The iron spearhead is cleaned of rust and sharpened to lethal keenness. Your shield must be checked for damage. The wooden boards that comprise it can crack. The leather covering can tear. The iron boss can loosen. A failed shield in battle means death. So you inspect every element carefully, making repairs where needed. Modern people who simply buy mass-produced items and discard them when broken cannot understand this intimate relationship with your equipment, where your life depends on your ability to maintain and repair it. Provisions must be gathered for the voyage. Dried fish, hard bread that can survive weeks without spoiling, salted meat, barrels of water and ale. Everything must be calculated carefully. Too little and you starve. Too much and the ship rides dangerously heavy in the water. These calculations are based on experience and estimation, with no precise measurements. The margin for error is slim, and many voyages have failed because provisions ran out or spoiled before reaching home. As preparations continue, the psychological weight increases. You're going on a raid, which means you're going to kill people. These aren't abstract enemies, but monks in monasteries, farmers in coastal villages, merchants traveling rivers. Some will fight back. Some will beg for mercy. Some will be women and children. You've been on raids before. You know what it entails. And the memory of previous violence haunts you. But your society glorifies raiding, calls it honorable, necessary, the path to wealth and status. To refuse would mark you as a coward, bring shame on your family, end your prospects for marriage or advancement. The night before departure, there's a feast and ceremony. The Jarl gives a speech about glory and honour, about making the gods proud, about bringing wealth back to the community. A Volva performs divination, reading omens to determine if the gods favour this expedition. Animals are sacrificed. A horse, precious and valuable, has its throat cut and blood collected for blessing the ships and warriors. You're sprinkled with this blood, marking you as dedicated to the gods' purposes. The ritual would seem barbaric to modern sensibilities, but to you, it's essential spiritual preparation for the violence to come. You make love to your wife that night, knowing it might be the last time. You don't speak of this possibility directly. Such talk would be unlucky, but it hangs between you unspoken. She gives you a small amulet, a Thor's hammer to wear around your neck for protection. You try to memorize her face, the feeling of her body against yours, in case you never return. The emotional intimacy is real, but tempered by cultural expectations that you show strength and confidence. Modern people who expect elaborate emotional processing would find this restrained farewell inadequate, but it's what your culture permits. Morning comes with bustle and urgency. The longship is launched with much effort, sliding down log rollers into the water. You and about 30 other warriors board, taking positions at the oars. The ship sits alarmingly low in the water when fully loaded with men, weapons, and provisions. Water sloshes over the low sides with every small wave. There are no life jackets, no safety equipment. If the ship goes down, you'll likely drown. Few Vikings can swim well, and even those who can wouldn't survive long in the cold water, wearing heavy clothes. The rowing begins, and you remember why you dread this. Each man has an oar, and everyone must pull in perfect synchronization. The oars are heavy, the stroke is long, and this must be maintained for hours. Your hands, already calloused from other work, develop new blisters that break and bleed. Your back and shoulders burn from the repetitive motion. Someone calls the rhythm, and you pull on each count, again and again and again. Modern people who complain about gym workouts would be broken by the first hour of this relentless physical labor. The open sea is terrifying. The longship rides each swell, rising and falling in stomach-churning motion. Water regularly washes over the sides, and someone must constantly bail to keep the ship from swamping. The horizon disappears when you're in the troughs between waves, then reappears when you crest. You have no compass, no GPS, no weather forecasts. Navigation depends on watching the sun and stars, on reading wave patterns, on noticing the flight patterns of birds. Getting lost at sea means death, and many ships simply disappear, never reaching their destinations. Seasickness affects everyone initially, though you've learned to push through it. You vomit over the side while still maintaining your rowing rhythm, because the rowing cannot stop. The smell of vomit, sweat, wet wool, and bilge water creates an overwhelming stench. Modern cruise passengers with their stabilized ships and comfortable cabins cannot imagine this visceral misery, but you endure because you must.
because showing weakness invites contempt, because this is what raiders do.
After days at sea, the coastline of a foreign land appears. This is somewhere in England or Ireland, where monasteries and villages offer rich targets. The Jarl decides on a monastery. Monks have wealth from tithes and donations, and they typically don't resist much. The plan is simple. Strike at dawn when they're at prayers, take everything valuable, leave before local forces can respond. You've done this before, and each time you promise yourself it will be the last. But the promises never hold. The ship beaches in the pre-dawn darkness, far enough from the monastery to avoid detection. You disembark into cold surf, wading ashore with your weapons held high to keep them dry. The physical shock of cold water after days in a cramped ship is intense. You form up with the other raiders, checking equipment one final time. Your heart pounds with fear and anticipation. The psychological state required for what comes next. The ability to commit violence against unprepared victims requires a mental shift that would horrify most modern people, even as you make it. The monastery appears ahead in the growing light. It's surrounded by a low wall, offering minimal defense. You hear singing from inside, morning prayers, monks who have no idea what's about to happen. The Jarl gives the signal, and you rush forward, screaming war cries meant to terrorize. The sound of 30 men bellowing as they charge is indeed terrifying. You've used it to make victims freeze in fear rather than flee or fight. Modern people accustomed to civilized discourse cannot comprehend deliberately cultivating this savage persona. You breach the wall and pour into the monastery grounds. Monks scatter in panic. Some freeze, some run. A few elderly ones stand defiantly. The violence begins immediately. Those who resist are cut down without hesitation. Those who flee are chased and dragged back. You're caught up in the frenzy, your training taking over, your spear striking and withdrawing, striking and withdrawing. Blood sprays. Men scream. The reality of combat is nothing like the glorified tales. It's chaotic, terrifying, and over quickly. A monk falls to your spear, clutching the wound, looking up at you with incomprehension and accusation. His blood pools on the stone floor. He tries to speak, perhaps praying, perhaps begging, perhaps cursing you. But blood fills his mouth, and only gurgles emerge. You've killed before, but it never becomes easier. Each face joins the collection in your nightmares. Modern people who've never witnessed violence firsthand, let alone committed it, would be traumatized beyond function by this moment. You push the feeling down and move on, because the raid isn't finished. The monastery's treasures are gathered rapidly. Gold and silver vessels from the altar, illuminated manuscripts bound in precious metals, coins from the monastery's stores, anything valuable and portable. Some raiders grab food supplies as well. The efficiency is practiced, everyone knowing their role. But this is also theft from sacred spaces, and despite your different religion, you feel a superstitious unease about stealing from any god's house. You've heard stories of raiders cursed for such sacrilege, though you don't voice these concerns. Some monks are taken captive. Young, healthy ones will fetch good prices in the slave markets. An older monk with obvious importance is kept for ransom. The captives are bound and herded toward the ship. Some resist and must be beaten or dragged. One tries to escape and is killed as an example. The casual brutality, the reduction of human beings to commodities, is normalized in your society, but would rightfully horrify modern sensibilities. You participate because refusing would mark you as weak, but part of you dies with each raid. The march back to the ship is tense. Local forces might respond at any moment. Everyone moves quickly, despite being laden with plunder and managing captives. You keep watching the tree line for signs of pursuit. Several times you think you see movement and your heart races, hand tightening on your spear. The constant vigilance, the awareness that you're now the vulnerable ones, creates an adrenaline state that leaves you exhausted and shaky once you finally reach the ship. Loading everything and everyone back onto the ship is chaotic. The captives are shoved into the center of the ship, bound and frightened. The plunder is stowed carefully to balance the weight. Men take their rowing positions again, and then you see them. Local warriors appearing on the shore, too late to stop the raid, but arriving in time to launch arrows at the departing ship. Arrows fall around you. One strikes the man beside you in the shoulder. Another lodges in the ship's side. You row frantically, putting distance between the ship and the shore, expecting any moment to feel an arrow punch into your back. Once clear, the mood shifts to celebration. The raid was successful. Plunder was taken. Only one man seriously wounded. Men laugh and boast, already beginning to embellish the tale. But you feel hollowed out, nauseous from more than just the ship's motion. You killed again. You helped enslave people. You participated in violence that, in your quieter moments, is wrong regardless of what your society says about it. But you don't share these thoughts because that would be shameful, weak, dishonoring to the warrior ideal. So you smile and accept congratulations and feel yourself becoming less human with each raid. The return voyage is supposed to be triumphant, but it becomes a nightmare. The weather turns against you. What starts as rain becomes a storm, waves rising higher than the ship's sides. Water pours over the gunwales faster than you can bail. The wind tears at the sail, threatening to rip it apart. The ship pitches wildly, and several men are thrown overboard, their screams cut short as they disappear into the dark water. There's no way to rescue them. Modern people, accustomed to Coast Guard rescues and safety regulations, cannot comprehend this helplessness. Watching companions drown while you fight just to keep your own vessel afloat. You bail water with desperate speed, using leather buckets, your hands, anything. Your arms burn with exhaustion, but you cannot stop. If the ship swamps, everyone dies. The cold water that splashes over you leaches heat from your body. Hypothermia begins to set in. You can feel your thinking becoming slower, your movements less coordinated. This is how many raiders die, not in glorious battle, but in freezing water in the middle of the sea. Their stories never told, because no one survives to tell them. The storm lasts for 2 days, or what you think is 2 days. It's hard to track time when you're exhausted, cold, wet, and in constant danger. You haven't slept, because sleeping means not bailing, means death. You haven't eaten, because food is impossible in these conditions. You exist in a state of pure survival, every moment focused on the next bucket of water thrown overboard, the next wave survived. Modern people who panic during minor turbulence on airplanes cannot imagine this level of sustained mortal terror. When the storm finally breaks, you assess the damage. 3 men were lost overboard. 2 more died of exposure, their bodies cold and stiff, and are committed to the sea with brief prayers. Several are injured from being thrown about the ship. The sail is torn and needs extensive repairs. Some of the plunder was lost, washed overboard in the chaos. The captives are in terrible condition, having been unable to shelter themselves while bound. One has died, another looks close to it. The glorious raid suddenly seems less glorious. The cost in lives perhaps exceeding the value of what was taken. Navigation is now uncertain. The storm drove you off course, and thick clouds prevent seeing sun or stars. The Jarl makes his best guess based on wave direction and what limited observations he can make. But you might be sailing in the wrong direction. Every hour that passes without seeing land increases the chance you'll run out of provisions before reaching shore. The psychological stress of being lost at sea with dwindling resources would break most people, but you have no choice except to keep rowing and hope. Water rations are cut to minimal amounts. The barrels were partially contaminated with seawater during the storm, and the remaining fresh water must last an unknown duration. Your throat is parched, your lips cracked and bleeding. The small amount of water you're allowed barely provides relief. Thirst becomes an obsession, overwhelming even hunger. Modern people who've never experienced true dehydration cannot understand how it dominates every thought, how you'd consider trading your share of the plunder for a single drink of clean water. Tempers flare as stress mounts. Men who are injured, exhausted, thirsty, and uncertain of survival turn on each other over small slights. An argument over rations nearly becomes a fight until the Jarl intervenes with threats. The social cohesion that holds the crew together frays under these conditions. You must constantly monitor your own words and actions, knowing that in this tense environment, any misstep could turn the crew against you. The psychological management required when you're at your weakest would overwhelm most modern people. Finally, mercifully, land appears on the horizon. It's not your homeland. You've drifted too far south. But it's land, and that means water and food are potentially available. The Jarl decides to go ashore, find a village, and resupply by force if necessary. You're now raiders again, but this time out of desperation rather than planned attack. The ethical distinction is meaningless to your victims, but to you it somehow feels worse, more shameful. You're not warriors seeking glory, but desperate men stealing what you need to survive. This second raid lacks the organized efficiency of the first. You're exhausted. Some are injured. Everyone is desperate. The village you attack fights back harder than expected. A farmer with a pitchfork drives it into the man beside you, the tines punching through leather and flesh. Someone sets a building on fire, and the smoke makes coordination difficult. The raid devolves into chaotic violence. You kill again, this time a farmer who was just trying to protect his family. His face is weathered and kind, perhaps similar in age to your father. This killing marks you differently than the others, feels more personal, more wrong. you escape the village with food and water, but also more injuries and another man dead. The cost of this voyage is climbing, and you're not even home yet. Everyone is somber now, the earlier celebration completely gone. This is the reality of raiding that the skalds don't sing about. The desperation, the random chance, the thin line between success and disaster. Modern people who romanticize Viking raiders would be horrified by this brutal pragmatism, this willingness to do whatever necessary to survive. Finally, after more days at sea, you recognize the landmarks of home. The relief is overwhelming, almost bringing you to tears, though you dare not show such emotion. You've survived, which many of your companions have not. As the ship beaches, families rush down to meet it. Some find their loved ones alive. Others find only the absence, and the wailing of new widows and orphans begins immediately. You watch the Jarl deliver the news to families of the dead, and you see his burden in carrying these messages. Your own wife is there, and seeing her alive and well, after fearing you never would again, breaks something in your careful control. You embrace her more tightly than is quite proper in public, and she doesn't complain. Your children crowd around, and you realize how much they've grown in your absence. But you also notice how you flinch when they move suddenly, how you're alert for threats, even in this safe moment. The psychological damage from the raid and voyage is already manifesting, though you have no framework to understand it as trauma. The plunder is distributed according to complex rules. The Jarl takes the largest share, then divides the remainder among the crew based on their contributions and status. Your share seems meager for what you endured. Some silver coins, a golden arm ring, a few other items. When divided among your family and accounting for what you owe to others, it barely seems worth the cost. Modern people who work 40-hour weeks for guaranteed wages would be appalled by this risk-reward calculation. But this is how wealth is acquired in your society if you weren't born into it. But even this modest wealth brings problems. Others in the community who didn't go on the raid view you with envy. Some make comments about how you're now too proud, how you flaunt your new arm ring. The social dynamics are complex. You're expected to be generous with your success, sharing with family and friends, but not so generous that you squander it, yet not so stingy that you seem greedy. Navigating this while exhausted and traumatized is exhausting in itself. You also must deal with the captive's fate. The monastery monk kept for ransom is sold to a merchant who will handle the negotiation. The younger captives are being distributed or sold. you're offered one, a young man about your son's age, to use as a slave on your farm. You know accepting means owning another human being, forcing them to labor against their will, keeping them in bondage. Your society sees nothing wrong with this, but looking at this terrified young man, you see your own son. You decline, citing lack of resources to feed another mouth, and you see relief on the captive's face before he's taken away to someone else's ownership. The physical recovery from the voyage takes weeks. You sleep for almost 2 full days when you first return, your body shutting down from accumulated exhaustion. When you wake, every muscle aches. The blisters on your hands are infected and must be treated. Your skin is damaged from salt, sun, and wind exposure. Your digestive system rebels from the sudden return to normal food after the voyage's deprivations. Modern people who think they're tired after a hard day at work cannot comprehend this level of complete physical breakdown. The psychological recovery is slower and incomplete. You have nightmares about the raids, about the storm, about drowning. You wake, gasping, tangled in furs. Your wife trying to soothe you. During the day, loud noises make you flinch. You find it hard to be around your children because their loud play triggers something in you. You're irritable, quick to anger, unable to feel joy even when things that should make you happy occur. What modern psychology would recognize as PTSD, your society has no name for. You're just expected to deal with it and prepare for the next raid. Your relationship with your wife is strained by what you cannot talk about. She knows you did terrible things. Everyone knows what raids involve, but the specifics must remain unspoken. The weight of these secrets creates distance between you. She notices you're different, harder somehow, less present even when you're physically there. Modern couples might seek therapy or counseling. You just have silence and gradual emotional drifting apart. The community holds a feast to celebrate the successful raid and honor the dead. You must attend, must participate in the toasts and the boasts, must listen to the scold, compose verses glorifying your actions. The words describe brave warriors heroically overcoming challenges, facing fearsome enemies, winning honorable victory. The reality was terrified. Monks slaughtered, desperate survival during a storm, panicked theft from a farming village. The disconnect between the glorified story and your memory is dizzying. But you remain silent because questioning the narrative would dishonor the dead and mark you as ungrateful for your survival. You visit the families of the men who died, bringing small portions of your share as is customary. Each visit is emotionally exhausting. The widows ask how their husbands died, and you must decide how much truth to tell. Did they die bravely fighting, or did they simply disappear into the waves during the storm? Do you admit you don't even remember which man fell where during the chaos? You craft versions that bring comfort while not quite being lies, and each conversation costs you another piece of your integrity. The return to normal life is jarring. After weeks of constant mortal danger, the mundane tasks of farming and animal husbandry seem almost unreal. You're supposed to repair fences, plant crops, make plans for winter, but these tasks feel meaningless compared to the heightened reality of the raid and voyage. Modern military veterans experience similar difficulties reintegrating into civilian life. But at least modern society has some acknowledgement of the challenge. Your society expects you to simply switch back to normal mode immediately. Summer arrives, and with it comes the endless work of farming. Fields must be ploughed using a simple wooden plough pulled by your weakest ox. The work is backbreaking, guiding the plough through rocky soil, clearing stones, making straight furrows. Your body still hasn't fully recovered from the voyage, and this labour makes every old injury ache. Modern farmers with their tractors and automated equipment would find this hand labour impossible to sustain for the hours required each day. Planting is equally demanding. Seeds saved from last year's harvest must be sown by hand, walking the furrows, broadcasting the grain, hoping for good germination. There's no guarantee of success. A late frost could kill the young plants. Insufficient rain could stunt growth. Pests could devastate the crop. Your family's survival for the coming year depends on these seeds, and you have no control over most factors affecting success. The anxiety of gambling your life on weather and chance would overwhelm modern people accustomed to food security. The farm animals require constant attention. Cattle must be moved to new pasture. Sheep must be sheared. Chickens tended. One of your cows develops an infected hoof. And despite your efforts to treat it, the infection spreads and the animal dies. This is a devastating loss. That cow represented food, labor power, and wealth. Replacing it will take years. The economic fragility of your existence, where one animal death can threaten your family's survival, reflects a precariousness that modern people with insurance and social safety nets cannot imagine. Between farm work, you must also prepare for winter. Wood for fuel must be cut, split, and stacked. Massive quantities of it, enough to last months. Meat must be preserved through smoking, salting, or drying. Vegetables must be stored in underground pits. The work is endless, the hours brutal, the stakes ultimate. Any task left undone or done poorly could mean death during the coming winter. Modern people who procrastinate or skip tasks they find unpleasant would not survive this environment where every task is truly essential. Your son is now old enough to begin serious training for raiding. You must teach him weapon skills, sailing, the mindset required for violence. But you look at his young face and remember the faces of the young men you killed. You wonder if you're preparing him for glory or simply ensuring he'll carry the same psychological wounds you do. Modern parents who agonize over much smaller decisions, what school to choose, what activities to encourage, cannot comprehend preparing your child to kill and potentially die violently as a normal part of growing up. Political tensions in the community demand your attention. Two families are in a blood feud over an insult, and everyone must choose sides or appear weak. You're related to both families through different connections, making neutrality difficult. The feud has already led to one ambush and killing, and retaliation is expected. You might be called upon to participate in violence against people you've known your whole life, or risk being seen as a coward or oath-breaker. The social complexity of these honor-based conflicts would be overwhelming for modern people accustomed to law-based justice systems. A traveling merchant arrives, bringing news from distant lands and goods for trade. You'd like to purchase iron for new tools, but your wealth from the raid has already been depleted by obligations and expenses. You have goods to trade: furs, amber, walrus ivory, but the merchant drives a hard bargain. The negotiation is complex, involving not just price, but social positioning and relationship building. Trade is as much about social bonds as economic exchange. Modern people who simply pay posted prices would struggle with this personalized, relationship-based commerce. Disease strikes the settlement during the summer, possibly dysentery from contaminated water. It spreads rapidly in the close quarters. People suffer with violent diarrhea and vomiting, becoming severely dehydrated. Several die, especially the very young and very old. You survive, but you're weakened, and watching others suffer and die from something you can't fight or prevent creates a helplessness that's psychologically crushing. Modern people with their antibiotics and IV fluids cannot imagine feeling this powerless against disease. Your wife tells you she's pregnant again. This should be happy news, but you both know the dangers. She's lost 2 previous pregnancies, and her last birth nearly killed her. Childbirth is one of the leading causes of death for women in your society. There are no hospitals, no surgery, just midwives with traditional knowledge and prayers to the goddesses. You're happy about a potential new child, but terrified of losing your wife. This mixture of hope and dread would be familiar to modern people only from our distant past, before modern obstetrics made childbirth survivable. You're beginning to feel the accumulated weight of your life. You're perhaps 30 years old, but your body feels much older. Your joints ache constantly. Several teeth are missing. Your hearing is damaged from battle noise and constant wind. Your lungs are compromised by smoke and infection. Old wounds never healed quite right. You're covered in scars, each one a memory of survival. Modern people who expect to be healthy and active into their 60s or 70s cannot comprehend how quickly this lifestyle ages and breaks the body. The psychological weight is equally heavy. You carry memories of people you've killed, friends you've watched die, violence you've committed and survived. You wake most nights from nightmares. You find it hard to feel joy anymore. Everything muted by the accumulated trauma. Your relationship with your family is strained by what you cannot share, by who you've become. The gods you pray to for meaning and protection feel increasingly distant. You're not even middle-aged by modern standards, but you're already worn down, worn out, surviving more than living, surviving. As another day ends in your longhouse, you lie in your sleeping alcove listening to the familiar sounds, snoring, the fire crackling, animals shifting, the wind against the walls. Tomorrow will bring more of the same, crushing labor, constant worry about survival, the weight of violence committed and anticipated. This is what it means to be a Viking, not the glorified raider of stories, but a person trapped in a grinding struggle against cold, hunger, disease, and the constant threat of violence. We romanticize the Vikings in our modern age. We see the beautiful ships, the intricate art, the dramatic sagas. We watch shows where warriors are brave and free, living lives of adventure and glory. But we filter out the cold that never quite leaves your bones, the hunger that's your constant companion, the violence that marks your soul, the disease and injury that slowly destroy your body, the psychological trauma that follows every raid. The Vikings were remarkable people. Their shipbuilding skills, their navigation abilities, their endurance and courage, these were genuine and impressive, but they were also human beings, trapped in a harsh environment that demanded everything from them.
The virtues we admire: bravery, loyalty, independence, came at the cost of almost everything else. Comfort, security, long life, psychological health, the freedom to be gentle or vulnerable. These were luxuries they could rarely afford. Could a modern person survive even one day as a Viking? Physically, perhaps, if they were already fit and accustomed to outdoor labour. But psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, the answer is almost certainly no. We are products of our time, as much as the Vikings were products of theirs. The gap between our worlds isn't just one of technology, but of fundamental assumptions about what life should be, what humans deserve, what we owe to ourselves and each other. Every physical challenge, the cold, the labour, the poor nutrition, the violence, would be compounded by psychological ones. The constant proximity to death, the acceptance of slavery, the expectation of committing violence, the lack of privacy, autonomy, or choice about your life's path. Modern people who struggle with minor stresses and discomforts will be completely broken by the relentless demands of Viking existence. The work alone would defeat most of us. Not just the intensity, but the endlessness of it. The knowledge that you can never do enough to guarantee survival. That one bad season, or one piece of bad luck, could undo years of labour. Accustomed to 8-hour workdays, weekends, vacation time, Vikings worked every daylight hour, and often beyond. Every day, forever, with only their failing bodies eventually excusing them from labour. The violence would traumatise most modern people beyond recovery. Not just experiencing violence, but participating in it, committing acts they would rightfully call atrocities, then being expected to celebrate these acts and do them again. The Viking who returned home psychologically intact from raids was the exception, not the rule. Most carried wounds we now recognise as PTSD, though they had no name for it and no treatment beyond endurance and alcohol.
The social structure would feel suffocating. Every aspect of life governed by honor codes and social obligations. Every action observed and judged by the community. Every decision made not based on your preferences, but on your status, your family obligations, your community's needs. Modern people who value individual choice and self-expression would feel imprisoned by these constraints, even as Vikings saw them as the framework that made survival possible. The Viking Age ended 1,000 years ago. The culture evolved, influenced by Christianity, changing economics, political developments. We can study this history, admire certain aspects of it, learn from their resilience and skills. But we should also recognize how fortunate we are to live in a time and place where life doesn't demand such constant sacrifice, where survival isn't a daily battle, where we can be fully human rather than just surviving. So tonight, in your heated or cooled home, with your full stomach and comfortable bed, with access to medical care and legal protection, with the freedom to choose your own path, imagine for a moment that Viking on their thin straw mattress in a smoky longhouse. They're aching from the day's labour and nursing injuries that will never fully heal. They're hungry despite having eaten. They're anticipating tomorrow's crushing work. They're carrying memories of violence that will haunt them until death. They know that one bad harvest, one severe winter, one raid gone wrong could end everything. Thank whatever circumstances of history and geography brought you into this world instead of that one. The Vikings survived and sometimes thrived in conditions that would destroy most people, and we can honor their memory without romanticizing their suffering. We can appreciate the skills and courage they developed. While being grateful, we don't need to pay the price they paid. Because the truth, the fundamental truth underlying everything we've explored, is this: you wouldn't survive a day as a Viking, not because you're weak, but because you're human. And being fully human, with all the vulnerability, sensitivity, and need for comfort that entails, was something that life allowed Vikings only in the briefest moments between struggles. They sacrificed almost everything we consider necessary for a good life, and they did so not by choice, but because their world demanded it. The Vikings were extraordinary, but their extraordinary nature came from surviving and functioning in conditions that would break most people. They endured cold that would kill us, labor that would cripple us, violence that would traumatize us, and uncertainty that would crush our spirits. They lived hard, died young, and rarely knew a moment of true peace or security. This has been 101 reasons, woven through the brutal reality of their existence, why you wouldn't survive as an ancient Viking. May we honor their memory by appreciating the comforts they never knew, and by never taking for granted the ordinary miracles of modern life. Warmth in winter, food security, medical care, physical safety, the freedom to be gentle, and the possibility of growing old in relative comfort and peace.